Ever felt like something invisible is controlling your decisions? Like every action, every desire, every impulse comes from a place deep within you that you can't control? Imagine there's a hidden force guiding your life. A force you can't name or even see, but it's always there, shaping your every move. Carl Jung called this force the unconscious. But what's even more disturbing is what it hides. A powerful, silent energy that's been running through you all along, like a vein under your skin. And it's not just about sex or desire. It's something much deeper, a primal need that drives your choices, your relationships, and your sense of self. Want to know what it really is? Stay tuned, because understanding this could change everything. And this is where Jung comes into play. Because he didn't talk about sex the way society does. He understood it as an archetype, a psychic force so powerful, so influential, that if you don't recognize it, it becomes your shadow. And that shadow begins to dictate your decisions, your fears, your relationships, even your dreams. It makes you live in an illusion of freedom while whispering every movement you make. Sex, as Jung conceived it, is not a taboo. It's a key, a door to who you truly are. But of course, crossing that door requires something few are willing to do. Facing your most uncomfortable impulses, your most unconfessable desires, your masks. Because here's the truth. Most people are not what they think they are. They are what their impulses have made of them. And the more they deny this, the more slaves they become. What would happen if everything you consider yours, your goals, your habits, your relationships, were tinted by a sexual desire, misunderstood, poorly managed, repressed, until it rots in the unconscious? What if that repression doesn't make you stronger, but weaker, more manipulable? What if what you call morality, prudence, or reason was just an elegant cage for something that's still screaming to get out? Don't get confused. We're not talking about pornography or scandals. We're talking about something much more dangerous. How an entire society has built its value system on the denial of a biological and psychic truth that keeps pounding relentlessly beneath the surface. The sexual impulse doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It only transforms into anxiety, into anger, into frustration, into addiction to control, approval, empty success, into broken relationships, chronic loneliness, permanent dissatisfaction. And if you don't see it, it's because you don't want to see it. Because seeing it means admitting that you're not in control, that there's a part of you that you've buried so carefully that you don't even remember it's there. What if I told you that your tastes, your passions, your fears are deeply shaped by this impulse? That even your firmest convictions might only be rationalizations, crafted to avoid facing that uncomfortable truth. Because when Jung talked about the anima and animus, he wasn't doing it from cold academicism. He was speaking from the experience of seeing how the most structured, correct, brilliant people fell time and time again into existential crises that had one common root: disconnection from their deep sexual dimension. Have you noticed how the most important decisions of your life are filled with a tension you can't explain? How a simple glance can affect you more than an hour-long speech? How desire, not love, desire, can make you betray your values, your plans, even yourself? That is the force we're talking about. And you can't tame it with nice phrases or repression. You can only understand it, integrate it, or be devoured by it. This isn't a video about sex. It's a video about true control, about the invisible string that moves civilization as it pretends to have overcome it. And you, watching this, have two paths. Keep believing you're free, or start looking for real. And be careful, because what you're going to see, you might not like, but it will be real, brutally real. And now, let's step into Carl Jung's world. Because understanding what he discovered can not only set you free, it can rewrite the way you see everything. Absolutely everything. Ready? Because this is going to hurt, but it's also going to awaken you. The first thing you need to understand is this: your mind is not a unified entity. You are not a single thing. Within you live multiple forces, desires, traumas, ideals, and masks. Jung called it the self, a psychic totality that we rarely manage to integrate. And one of the most powerful forces within that inner chaos is what he called libido. But not the Freudian libido reduced to a genital impulse. Jung went further. For him, libido is a universal psychic energy. It's its creative impulse, its destructive impulse. It's the foundation upon which your personality is built. And yes, it's also sexuality, but it's not just about sex, it's about transformation. This is where most get lost. They believe that denying sex is controlling it, that repressing it is overcoming it, that hiding it is maturing. But what really happens is that they fragment. They break their own identity into two. They separate what they feel from what they show. And that division turns them into puppets of themselves. Because what you repress doesn't disappear, it hides. And from the shadow, it begins to move like a chained beast. Silent, yes, but increasingly stronger. Have you ever wondered why you keep making the same mistakes in your relationships? Why you attract the same people, the same conflicts, the same disappointments? It's not a coincidence. It's unconscious repetition. It's libido acting from the shadow, seeking to resolve what you don't want to see, seeking balance through chaos. Jung warned over and over, what you don't make conscious becomes your destiny. And that includes your sexual impulses. What you don't understand about yourself controls you. What you deny in yourself possesses you. Now, pay attention because this is key. Repressed sexual desire doesn't just affect your intimate life, it filters into your spirituality, your creativity, even your sense of purpose. Why? Because when that energy is not channeled consciously, it distorts, it turns into obsession for control, into compulsion to reach goals you don't understand, into desperate seeking of recognition, into chronic need for validation. You look around, and everyone seems to be pursuing something: success, fame, partner, money, power. But behind all that, often there's the same hole, a brutal disconnection from their authentic sexual dimension. And this is not a moral critique, nor a religious condemnation. It's a clinical observation. Jung saw it in hundreds of patients, educated, sophisticated, conscious people, but broken inside, lost, fragmented, powerless in front of a force they didn't know how to name. Many came seeking spiritual, philosophical, existential answers, and Jung, with terrifying clarity, led them to look exactly where they didn't want to look, at the desire they had been denying for years. Because desire, when not accepted, becomes distorted. It infiltrates your thoughts, it sneaks into your decisions, and slowly, it turns you into a character. Yes, a character. A mask. Because here's another big truth no one wants to accept. Most people are not themselves. They are a controlled, edited, carefully molded version to avoid rejection, to meet expectations, to keep the order. But beneath that mask, the unconscious burns. And one of its most intense fires is eros, attraction, magnetism, energy-seeking connection, creation, expansion. And do you know what happens when that's repressed for years? It starts sabotaging you. It sabotages you in your work, in your relationships, in your mental health. You can't silence such a deep part of you without consequences. Jung made it clear. All unexpressed energy turns into neurosis. And today we see it everywhere. Brilliant people, talented people, people with resources, completely stuck, trapped in cycles of anxiety, emotional dependence, existential emptiness. And no one dares name the real origin. A brutal disconnection from sexual energy, understood not as something vulgar, but as something essential. Because here's another uncomfortable truth. Sexual energy isn't just for pleasure. It's a tool for self-knowledge, for inner transformation. It's the raw material with which you can rebuild yourself if you know how to use it. The problem is, no one teaches us that. They teach us to fear it, to hide it, to silence it. And so, entire generations learn to live mutilated, with half of their psyche asleep, with a desire that doesn't disappear but disguises itself. It disguises itself as ambition, as romanticism, as false spirituality. But it's still there, crying out to be integrated. And now I ask you something you can't answer lightly. How many of your most important decisions were based on the desire to be desired? How many times did you become what you knew would attract attention, even though it took you further from yourself? How many times did you sacrifice your authenticity for a moment of validation? If you have the courage to answer yourself honestly, you'll notice something disturbing. That your life, in many ways, doesn't belong to you. It belongs to unrecognized desire, to what Jung called the collective unconscious, which, in this case, acts as a cultural sexual mold, a set of images, roles, and expectations that we all absorb without realizing it. And that mold is stronger than you think. It tells you how to desire, whom, when, how much. It tells you what's attractive, what's normal, what's excessive. And if you don't fit, you feel broken. But the most dangerous part is this. The more you try to fit in, the further you get from your inner truth. And that's where the symptom appears. Because Jung also said that symptoms are the soul's attempts to heal. Anxiety, depression, insomnia, existential distress are not the problem. They are the cry of something inside you that has been locked away for years. And if that cry is your unintegrated sexual energy, not the energy of one night, not the superficial desire, we're talking about deep eros, the one that connects you to your creativity, to your passion, to your personal power. That eros that Jung associated with the individuation process, with inner alchemy, with the journey to the real self, not the social character. And do you know what the first stage of that journey is? Recognizing that you are not free, that your chains are not in the system or in society or even in your history. They are in your unconscious, in your shadow, in that corner where your sexuality has been exiled, distorted, and hidden all your life. And until you go there, you'll keep seeking outside what's been inside. You'll keep believing you need love, success, recognition, when in reality, all you need is to reconnect with the source, with that primal, brutal, powerful energy that has inhabited you since before it had a name. Sex, yes, but not as the ads or movies or algorithms understand it, but as Jung understood it, as the most honest door to who you truly are. And the question left is simple but devastating. Are you going to keep living as if that door doesn't exist? Because if you decide to open it, get ready. Nothing will ever be the same. And here is where everything gets even more twisted. Most people not only ignore that deep energy, they project it. Jung said that everything you don't make conscious gets projected outside. Do you know what that means? That a large part of what you criticize, desire, or reject in others actually lives within you. It's your own shadow screaming through someone else's face. And few things provoke more projection than repressed sexual desire. That is the root of many chaotic relationships, emotional dependencies, unhealthy idealization. You don't love the other. You love what you project onto them. You love the part of you that you don't know how to integrate. Look carefully. When someone dazzles you, when you feel an inexplicable, almost mystical attraction, you're not seeing that person clearly. You're seeing a mirror of the eros you carry inside and don't dare to touch. That's the trap. You don't fall in love with them. You fall in love with what they awaken in you. And what happens when what they awaken is so powerful? It destabilizes you. You chase it like a drug addict, not for love, but for need. Because without realizing it, that person becomes your unconscious access to your own inner power. But of course, since you don't see it this way, you call it destiny. You call it your other half. You call it soulmate. And you get lost in a narrative that justifies attachment, obsession, emptiness, all because you don't know that what you're seeking is inside you. Jung saw this again and again. Men projecting their anima onto women, women projecting their animus onto men. These aren't just poetic terms, they're internal realities, parts of your psyche that are incomplete. And every time someone appears in your life and shatters your assumptions, it's because they're touching one of those parts. And what does most do when they feel that intense attraction? Run toward it, become obsessed, attached to it. Or, on the other hand, run terrified because OS isn't comfortable. True OS disarms. It strips you bare. It forces you to see yourself without filters, and not everyone can endure. Now, let's go even deeper. Why does this energy have so much power over you? Why is it able to alter your nervous system, your judgment, your identity? Because it's not just biology, it's myth, it's symbol, it's archetype. In every culture for millennia, sex has been represented as something sacred and dangerous at the same time. And it's no coincidence the sexual act is the only moment in which the ego dissolves completely, where control is lost, where the primitive, the divine, the animal appear. That's why religions tried to control it, because they knew that whoever controls sex controls the individual. And if you don't control your relationship with that energy, someone else will. And here comes the most disturbing part. You don't need to have sex for sex to control your life. You can be celibate, a monk, celibate by choice or circumstance, and still be completely dominated by that energy if you don't know how to integrate it. Because Eros doesn't need the physical to manifest. It does so in your fantasies, your insecurities, your blocked creativity, your way of loving, your way of hating. It's in the way you compete, stand out, relate to power, money, art. Repressed Eros will find any crack to slip through. If it can't express itself directly, it will disguise itself as envy, as pride, as a compulsive need to stand out, or even as self-sabotage. Because yes, even self-sabotage can be an unconscious form of punishment for not allowing yourself to live from what you truly desire. Jung warned that what doesn't transform repeats itself, and repressed desire, far from extinguishing, becomes compulsion. Patterns that drag on for generations. How many family conflicts, how many personal tragedies arise from repressed, distorted, or unexpressed sexuality? Think about it. Couples that destroy each other, children who inherit unsaid guilt, secrets buried under fake smiles, and marriages that are living tombs, all because no one talks about it, because no one wants to look at the real origin. The unconscious doesn't negotiate, it doesn't reason, it just expresses. And if you don't give it a conscious channel, it filters through wherever it can, sometimes in the form of neurosis, other times in the form of disturbing dreams, sometimes as a sudden passion, and others as a shadow so deep you don't even know it's there, but it conditions everything. That's why Jung insisted so much on integration. It's not enough to control desire, you have to listen to it, understand what it's trying to tell you, because in that energy, there's also an evolutionary key. Eros, when it's not perverted, is an extraordinary creative force. Here's something you didn't expect. Great ideas, great works, great acts of personal transformation often arise from the transmutation of desire. Jung connected it to the alchemical process. Lead becomes gold. The instinctive becomes purpose. The passionate becomes consciousness. But that only happens if you have the courage to look inside, to face your shadow without fleeing, to stop blaming the world for what you haven't been able to integrate into yourself. Because at the core, what do you fear most about desire? Rejection, judgment? Or are you afraid that if you allowed yourself to truly desire, your entire current life would collapse? Maybe you realize that many of your decisions have been packed with mediocrity to avoid confronting your inner fire. Maybe what scares you most is not losing control, but realizing that you never had it. That what you called willpower was a chain reaction of impulses you never understood. And what happens when you finally start to see? You become free. Not free in the superficial sense of doing whatever you want, but in the deep sense of being able to choose with awareness, of looking at your Eros directly and saying, I know you're there. I don't need to disguise you. I can walk with you. And that changes everything. It changes how you work, how you love, how you create, how you look at yourself in the mirror, because you stop fighting against yourself. But be careful. Freedom comes at a price. When you integrate your Eros, you can no longer blame others. You can no longer say, this happened to me, or they did this to me. You have to admit that many times it was you who built the cage, that it was your own repression that turned you into a slave. And that's not easy to swallow, because we live in a culture that idolizes the victim, that applauds pain not as a stage, but as an identity. Breaking with that requires strength. It requires symbolically dying, leaving behind the version of yourself that was built to please, to be accepted, to fit in. And that hurts because there are things you can't heal without first destroying, and your relationship with desire is one of them. Now, imagine for a moment that you had known all this before, that you were taught from childhood that your sexual energy wasn't a problem but a compass, that you didn't have to hide your Eros, but learn to listen to it, to channel it, to turn it into art, into action, into meaning. What kind of person would you be today? What kind of life would you be living? You can't change the past, but you can choose from now on whether you will keep ignoring this part of yourself, or if you will finally let it transform you. And the most amazing thing is that when you integrate your Eros, it no longer controls you. You no longer need to obsess over validation, or fall into power games, or live trapped in cycles of relational anxiety. Because Eros, when conscious, becomes light. A bright light. Yes, sometimes uncomfortable, but also healing, creative, expansive. A light that not only shows you who you are, but who you could become. So, the next time you feel an attraction without explanation, overwhelmed by a desire you don't understand, paralyzed by an image, a person, or a sensation, don't run away. Don't moralize it. Don't disguise it. Ask yourself, what part of me is speaking right now? What needs to be seen? What's trying to free itself? Because maybe that desire isn't the problem. Maybe it's the door. And are you going to open it? And just when you think you've understood everything, the final trap appears. The most sophisticated one. The one that has trapped millions without them realizing it. Because once you make your eros conscious, once you manage to see its power and start to integrate it, the spiritual ego emerges, the enlightened character, that inner voice that whispers, you've transcended desire, it no longer controls you. But be careful, that's also an illusion, another mask. Because eros is not transcended, it is inhabited, it's not overcome, it's honored, and if you think you're above it, then you still haven't understood it. This is where everything gets more delicate because the real work isn't waking up to desire. It's walking with it without turning it into identity, without clinging to it, without worshiping it, without using it as a new disguise. It's recognizing that eros isn't an enemy nor a god. It's a part of you, a fragment of the fire that lives within you. And like all fire, it can illuminate or it can burn you. The difference lies in whether you recognize it or deny it. Look around you. Everyone seems to be running towards something. Money, fame, perfect body, ideal partner. But what if all that were nothing more than an unconscious ritual to reconnect with lost eros? What if the real path weren't about accumulating more, but about looking inside and discovering which part of you was silenced when you started behaving well? Society wants you domesticated. It wants you predictable. It wants you disconnected from your desire because it knows that a person who has reconciled with their eros can't be manipulated. They don't buy empty narratives. They don't need to belong to any tribe to feel complete. They are free. And that's scary because a free person is dangerous. Not because they harm, but because they infect. Because their very presence reveals how asleep everyone else is. And now we are here, you and me, at the end of this journey, or at the beginning, depending on how you see it. Because what you've heard today are not answers. They are triggers, cracks, questions that may chase you for days. And that's fine. That's the sign that something has moved inside. That what's been repressed is beginning to have a name, shape, voice. Maybe now you'll start noticing things. Maybe you'll remember moments when you denied your desire out of fear. Maybe you'll start seeing patterns. Maybe you won't be able to look at certain people or yourself the same way anymore. And that, believe me, is a good sign, because only what is first seen with brutal honesty can transform. But before you close, I want you to do something. If you've made it this far, it's not a coincidence. Comment below this phrase, "My shadow no longer scares me." Don't do it for me, do it for you. Because writing it, affirming it, recognizing it out loud is an act of power. It's the first step to stop living in denial and start living in truth. And if this video has touched something deep inside you, if it has moved even a stone from the wall you built around your desire, subscribe. Because this channel isn't here to entertain you. It's here to challenge you, to shake you, to show you what no one wants you to see. We're not here to decorate the surface. We're here to blow it up. So follow me if you have the courage to look at what others hide. If you're tired of empty explanations, if you want to understand how your mind really works, and above all, if you're ready to stop lying to yourself. And now, I'm leaving. But before that, listen carefully. Turn off the screen, close your eyes, and ask yourself silently, what part of you have you been denying all this time? Take a deep breath and listen to what silence tells you, because sometimes what you don't hear is what screams the loudest. See you in the next video, or maybe in your shadow.